Welcome everyone to tonight's Better Building speaker series. My name is Hannah Mintzloff. I'm the Energy Efficiency Coordinator at the Ecology Action Center, and I work on the Energy and Climate team. The Better Building speaker series is taking place in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral, unceded, and unsurrendered territory of the Mi'kmaq. We're grateful to live in this place that has been home to Linux since time immemorial, and we honor past, present, and future traditional knowledge keepers. We honor and support Indigenous sovereignty and the peace and friendship treaties that bind us all in relationship. As an environmental organization working in these lands and waters, the Ecology Action Center is committed to upholding our responsibilities as treaty people and to work toward decolonization and environmental justice. Tonight, we're joined by Rupinder Kaur. Rupinder works with Net Zero Atlantic through the Verschuren Center as a community outreach coordinator. She has developed a base knowledge of geothermal technology and recently graduated from Cape Breton University with a BET in Petroleum and Geosciences pathway degree and holds 2 years of prior experience in oil and gas field and manufacturing. Net Zero Atlantic is building project development capacity for mid-depth geothermal energy projects in Mi'kmaq and rural Nova Scotia communities through the Community Geothermal Resource Capacity Assessment and Training Program, for short known as GeoCAT. And Rupinder is going to talk to us about this work this evening. We're also joined by her colleague at Net Zero Atlantic, Joe Collier, and Joe will be available to answer any questions that you have along the way. Rupinder, I will hand it over to you.
Oh, thank you, Hannah, for a wonderful introduction. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Net Zero Atlantic's GeoCAT session. I'm Rupinder. Huge thanks goes to Hannah for organizing this session for us and EAC, Ecology Action Center, for providing this wonderful opportunity for us to present our project. So, as Hannah mentioned, I'm a community outreach coordinator. I'm based out in Sydney. Recent graduate from CBU. I joined this project since last year, July 2023, and have been developing knowledge in geothermal energy. And so far, my work role involves community engagement and educating specifically Cape Breton-based communities about this wonderful technology and getting perception from community, what they think about it, and answering community questions, giving feedback to our stakeholders and project developers. So I would recommend, if you guys have any questions or concerns, comments, you can put in the chat box and we can go over any questions at the end of presentation. Before starting my presentation, I would like to introduce Joe Collier. He's a project manager of our project. He's been managing our project since I joined this opportunity, and he has done a great job in mentoring the project, and I will hand over to Joe.
Thank you, Rupinder. I'll just give, just a quick introduction about myself and about Net Zero Atlantic. I'm a project manager, as Rupinder mentioned, with Net Zero Atlantic, focused on our geothermal capacity building project here. Net Zero Atlantic is a not-for-profit organization based in Halifax, where I currently am. That works to facilitate Atlantic Canada's transition to net zero in an equitable manner, primarily through addressing knowledge gaps and providing applied research and project management support. I'll leave it at that for now and pass it back over to you, Rupinder.
Thank you, Joe, for setting up the stage and wonderful introduction to Net Zero Atlantic. So as we move forward with our presentation, Joe, can you move to next slide? Yeah. So our basic objective is to educate communities about geothermal energy and to know the perception of community, how they think about this technology, and to make awareness to the community, what is actually geothermal energy and how it carries potential towards different applications, like towards residential or commercial heating and cooling applications, and what are some existing projects in Cape Breton, how we can model this project like how we can develop similar projects in Cape Breton and how we can move forward with the project. So moving on towards next slide. So these are my key contents of presentation. I will be going over what are some different types of geothermal energy and what is actually geothermal energy and what are some uses and applications of this energy, what are some costs associated with it, and where does the Cape Breton lies in terms of geothermal potential? Do we have any potential here? Like, and what are some existing projects in Nova Scotia and Cape Breton? And with conclusion, I will share some contact details of mine and as well as Net Zero Atlantics so that you guys can get involved with us in the project. And with moving on to the next slide. So first we have to understand what is actually geothermal energy is. So to understand that, this is the energy that we harness from Earth's mantle surface. So we have like different layers on Earth. We know there's a crust, there's a mantle. So geothermal energy is that energy that we harness from the mantle layer of the Earth. And as you can see from the diagram, we have different temperature ranges that ranges from like 10 degrees Celsius to over 200 degrees Celsius. But it really depends on the geothermal gradient. That means how much is the potential of that area, which means how much the degree Celsius of that area per kilometer is. And it depends on the different regions. Like, for example, Sydney River has different geothermal gradient and Glace Bay may be having a different geothermal gradient. So it all depends on different gradients. As we can see from the diagram here, application of that geothermal energy also changes with the temperature. As we can see, like the shallower surface has lower temperature, and thus they have different applications like towards agriculture heating and towards greenhouse heating, maybe like shallower heat pumps and building heating and cooling application and agriculture applications. But as we move towards like deeper surfaces, we have higher temperature and application also changes like electricity generation and power generation and industrial uses. So I will go over the application later in the slide. But before that, I will like to explain geothermal energy, how like it gets developed in the surface. So moving on towards the next slide. So to understand that, we have to see what is the process of conduction here. So conduction is the process when when the heat energy moves from the cooler surface to the hotter surface. So means like geothermal energy, which is stored inside the layer that moves toward the cooler surface. So like rainwater or water aquifer is getting collected over the layer, and geothermal energy is providing heat energy to the surface. So that water is getting heated up by the geothermal energy, and that we can retrieve at the surface with the different methods. And I will go over that in the next slide. But before that, like, this is just a simple process. This is just a simple diagram to like get a knowledge of how geothermal energy is heating up the aquifer that is underlaying over the layer of that earth. Now, moving on towards the next slide, here we have different technologies, like how we can retrieve or access our geothermal energy at the surfaces. I will start with the left of diagram here. We have open loop GSHP, which means when we lie down like open piping system in the groundwater surface, so we can draw like directly hot water to the surface, which means if I'm like having open pipes in my aquifer, I can draw somewhere around 10 to 17 degrees Celsius hot water to the surface, and I can use towards heating and cooling. That's called as open loop surface because it does have like direct contact with the groundwater. So as we all know, Nova Scotia has some groundwater contamination regulations. So we are not focusing on this kind of project right now. As we move on towards closed loop GSHP array, which is kind of similar concept, but here we are using boreholes, like closed piping boreholes, to get the heating energy with the help of these pipes here. The only difference between closed loop and open loop is like closed loop doesn't have any contact with water. So we are only drawing heating energy to the surface rather than drawing directly water to the surface. So as we can see, the temperature is also less in case of closed loop. That is because we are not directly drawing the heated up water. So that is why the temperature is really low in case of closed loop. And that is why we need like extra piping system to draw that, to like, fill in that gap of energy. As we move on towards mine water heating energy, so this is, as the name suggests, if we draw like mine water to the surface, we can use it towards heating or cooling or district heating water. So the rainwater that's like getting collected at the mine, it goes deeper and deeper as the time passes. So that the depth that is at 800 meter, it's like heating up high temperature, that is 25 degrees Celsius. As we can see, like 25 is greater than previous two systems. So this is like pretty high temperature we can get from mine water heating energy systems. And this is our project focus, which is like hydrothermal system, that is direct use of heat, which means if we go like between 2000 meters to 5000 meters, we can get 60 degrees Celsius of water, and we can draw directly to the surface to use it towards different applications. As we can see from the diagram here, we have houses and we can see some commercial buildings. So that means like we can build a district energy heating network. But in case of like mine water and closed loop and open loop, it can only serve like single buildings or less than that, or just one house. So this is majorly our project focus, which is focusing on mid-depth geothermal potential. Last but not least is the power generation. So we call it enhanced geothermal system. So really process is to fracture the rock here. So granite intrusion means those massive amount of heating energy is being stored in the granite rocks. So the process of fracturing is when like we are injecting liquids to break down the rock to get the extra heat energy. As we can see from the temperature, it's like larger than 130 degrees Celsius, like pretty much like higher temperature. So in countries like USA and Germany, they are using these kind of systems. But in Cape Breton, we are only focusing on mid-depth potential, which serve like 60 degrees Celsius or more than that. Moving on towards the next slide. We have different applications, like how we can make use of that geothermal energy that we are drawing out to the surface. I will start with the left of diagram here. We have greenhouse heating. We have pond heating. As we draw heating energy to the surface, we can heat up the internal space of the greenhouses. We can warm up the water for aquaculture uses, or we can use it for drying grains or drying crop in agriculture or forestry sector. So all the temperature ranges are different, but the only focus here is to showcase like how different sectors can use this geothermal energy for different applications. So as this picture suggests, we can also use towards like district heating systems. Like as I mentioned, we can heat up one house or more than one houses, depending on the geothermal gradient of that area and how is the energy demand of that area is, and all other conditions. We can use in the hotels or spas for heating up water. Now focusing on the next slide. Now focusing only in the agriculture sector, which means our temperature range is like somewhere around 60 degrees Celsius and greater than that, but we can use it towards different agriculture focused applications, like as I mentioned before, food drying or food processing or evaporation or like mushroom cultures, or whether it's like heating up the space inside greenhouses. So it does have like various range of application, but it all depends on the gradient that we can get from that surface. And it also depends on what is the ideal energy demand of that facility. For example, if aquaculture wants to use geothermal energy, so we have to like analyze what is the energy demand of that aquaculture. Is it like constant and consistent for over the year? Is it like very less and very higher in both seasons? So it should be like a consistent and ideal energy demand for the whole year. And that could be a best customer for geothermal energy. Moving on towards the next slide. Why geothermal energy is different from all other technologies? So we have three factors here. I will start with the first factor, that is it's more reliable. Why it's more reliable? Because it's present underneath the Earth's surface, so it's untouchable. It's independent of external factors. No snow season can harm it. No weather factors can harm it up. So it's more reliable and independent of external factors. And the second reason it's renewable. It's not going anywhere. So Earth energy like always harness energy itself. So it's like renewable and it's space efficient, 24/7 available. It's not like solar and wind energy where we have to focuses on like sunlight, or if there's any constant speed wind outside, then only we can get wind energy. So it's unlike those technologies. And the last but not least is the operational and maintenance cost. Why cost of geothermal energy is lower? Because as we have enough heat energy inside Earth's surface, so it doesn't need any electric resistant backup or energy backup to run the system. So that is why it has very least energy consumption as comparison to air source heat pump or any source of heat pumps. So moving on towards the next slide, we have different factors and different benefits of using geothermal over another technologies. As I mentioned, the first point is low operational and maintenance cost, which means it doesn't require electric resistance backup. We can easily make this project cost effective because I will discuss the installation cost on the next slide, but it does have very less operational cost, which means we can make it cost effective if the facility has ideal energy demand and it has like sustainable, like high temperature aquifer, and it does have high geothermal gradient. So the second point is water is not getting wasted. We are not depleting water, or we are not dumping water to the open surface. Instead, we are injecting water back to the ground, and then that same water is getting reheated and we are drawing into the surface. So that means we are not wasting here. We are reusing the water instead. And it does have very low GHG emission as comparison to conventional fuel sources like natural gas and propane. I will not say it does have very like, it doesn't have any GHG emission. It's like 0%. It's not like that. It does have GHG emission, but it's lower than conventional fuel sources like natural gas and propane. Last but not least is the carbon footprint and how much like space is geothermal energy is covering. We can see sort of like comparison with other renewable energies. We have solar, we have wind energy that has larger carbon footprints, but in terms of geothermal, it's very small because it doesn't like occupy much space rather than just like few pipes and heat exchanger and a small setup. So we can go from there. As we can see, like for just producing 1 gigawatt of energy, we have to use like 4,300 acres of land for laying down like solar panels and PV panels. In terms of like wind and offshore, we have to use much space, but in terms of geothermal, it's only 47 acres. That is least carbon footprint in comparison to other technologies. With moving on towards the next slide, we have like how much is gonna cost if I want to install geothermal energy in my space. So installation cost, unfortunately, it's very high because it like has so many components with it. It comes with the drilling, that is $1,000 per meter. That is pretty high range. It's gonna cost like $1 million for 1 kilometer for drilling. And these are other factors like laying down the pumps and pipelines and heat exchangers, and that is a facility construction cost, but the drilling cost is only like $1,000 per meter. So that construct towards the high installation cost of geothermal energy. But other than that, operational and maintenance cost is lower. That's gonna make this project cost effective. And also it does have very high like efficiencies, which is around like 300%. Unlike air source heat pump and unlike ground source heat pumps. So it does have very like longer lifespan. So it can go like 12 to 20 years of payback periods if the conditions are met, like energy demand is ideal and the facility has good geothermal energy and gradient, and if they like fulfill another conditions. If we come down to the cost structure, we have 10% of the project cost that goes to evaluation, which means like doing geological surveys and assessments and all other pre-required assessment for the project. And 80% goes to delivery, which means making construction lines and then laying down pumps and pipelines and, you know, making any pipelines inside the buildings or to connect pipelines to connect the buildings. So something like that, and heat exchangers. That is 80%. And 5% goes to permitting, which means like getting approval from councils, municipalities, and from the provincial government. 5% goes from design, which means designing the actual project. So that goes towards the total cost. With that, I will move to next slide, which showcase like how we can see if there is actual potential of geothermal in Cape Breton. So this is the map that was evaluated by Department of Natural Resources and Renewables in partnership with Net Zero Atlantic. The showcase like which area does have geothermal potential, and we have like 3 shades of the map here. We have darker purple, and we have middle shade of the purple, and we have less pink color. This map showcases geothermal potential all over the province. We can start with the darker shade of the purple here. We have mid-depth geothermal potential, but that has like higher temperature ranges. That is like larger than 60 degrees Celsius. But this is our project focus that focuses on only 3 dots here. We can like sort of mismatch the gradients from here. It ranges from 20 to somewhere around 25 degrees Celsius per kilometer. So that showcase, if we drill down to like 1 kilometer, we can get 25 degrees Celsius. If we go to like 2 kilometers, the temperature goes on. This is the Cape Breton area that focuses on, a mid-depth potential, which means serving temperature of around 20 to 60 degrees Celsius. If we drill down to like greater than 3 kilometers of depth. Yeah, as we move towards next slide. Yeah, what is the history of Nova Scotia in terms of geothermal and mine heating projects? So as maybe some of people are already aware of this project, this is the mine heating project that was done in, I think they established in 1994. The mine heating project is like heating up the businesses around and the school buildings around. So this is a pretty nice project that we can take reference from. And I would say like we can similarly build similar projects in Cape Breton based on mine heating, as we have a history of coal mines here in Nova Scotia as far as like the history is concerned. So according to the studies, we have 400,000 meters of mine water that was retrieved with the temperature of 18 degrees Celsius, that is heating up the businesses around. I think they have a Surrey battery called company that's getting the mine water heating energy system here, and they have school building and they have other businesses that's getting heating energy from the mine water. Yeah, so learning point is like we can build similar kind of model if we do further analysis, if we like reassess the resources and we have like jump into the assessments. Moving on towards next slide, we have different projects that is happening in Cape Breton, that is existing in Cape Breton. We have a list of all the projects that holds like geothermal projects there. We have first in the diagram here, member two sports center. This facility is like 100,000 feet square, and they are having a walking area, and they have an ice rink system. They have a sports center and a wellness area, and also they have like public access facilities. I think they use it towards like conferences and events kind of thing. So they have ice rink system, which is using a liquid source heat pump to store heat energy that is dissipated from the ice making system. So concept is like, it's not very focused towards geothermal, but we can say they have built it out the geothermal system, which is working very similar to geothermal energy systems. As we move towards Canadian Coast Guard College, this is their student sports center swimming pool. They have this energy efficient building. I think they have installed a liquid source heat pump, which they are drawing like seawater for heating up the space. They have upgraded like fan coil units and fan drives to make this building like energy efficient and to make this building ready for net zero building future. They have like pretty highly efficient technologies installed at Canadian Coast Guard College. It's really interesting to see their technology. It's like somewhat similar to geothermal energy. And last but not least is a Portlo Tech community greenhouse. This is the greenhouse that works similar to geothermal. They have a climate change batteries, climate change based battery, which works similar to geothermal. Like during the daytime, they store sunlight energy into it, and during the nighttime, it emits heating energy into the space of greenhouse. So like similarly, we have like potential in Cape Breton. We have ice rink and greenhouses that could use like similar kind of technology in geothermal. This is the list of all center and research center and facilities that are using geothermal. So it's a good one to check out. Moving on towards the last slide. So what are the learning points from our presentation? It's really looking over geothermal potential in Cape Breton. And as we know, there's a significant potential here. As we looked over the map, we have 3 areas that has been assessed for mid-depth geothermal potential in Nova Scotia. And why this technology is different than other technologies, as I mentioned, it's renewable, it's not going anywhere, it's untouchable, and it's independent of external factors, and it's space efficient. We have a potential here, like we have different applications, as we have seen, like greenhouses, we can heat up the aquacultures, we can use it towards district heating, or we can integrate it with the existing infrastructure. We can integrate with the existing heating systems. We can use an ice rink system, as member 2 has done the project. So we have a coal mine history. We looked over the Spring Hill mine project, so we can take reference from there. We can build similar kind of project here in Nova Scotia, as far as like we know coal mining history is concerned. We have like highly cost is concerned, but we have lower operational and maintenance costs, which makes it cost effective in the long run. If a facility has good ideal energy demand and it can go over like 12 to 20 years and it can pay back in that time period, and it can make the cost-effective solution for the facility. What are some next steps involved with the project is further assessment at the provincial level. That map I just saw, it's not recent one. We have to like access the resources if you want to make sure the project is viable and it's like commercially feasible. We need to we need to like look over the resources again and we need to access it. With that, I will end my presentation with the last slide that showcase our contact details. If any of the audience has any question, concerns, or feedback, or any suggestion for us, we are open to any questions.
Thank you so much, Rupinder. That was really interesting and very informative, and I already have a couple of questions for you. I invite our guests tonight, if you would like to turn on your cameras and your mics. If you didn't get the message at the beginning or in the chat, you might notice that under your picture, you show up as Hannah Minsloff. It's because I shared my link to the Zoom meeting with you. We've been having some issues with Zoom meeting links in the past. So you can click on, hover over your image, click on the 3 little dots, select rename, and type in your name, and then we won't call everybody Hannah. So if you have any questions, feel free just to ask them. You can put up your hand, put them in the chat, and I will start us off with a question for you, Rupinder.
Sure.
I was curious to know why the drilling cost is so much higher per meter than for residential. We had a quote done for geothermal for our house before we found out that there wasn't a drilling rig small enough to come into a downtown Dartmouth area available in Nova Scotia. And I don't think the cost was anywhere near $1,000 per meter. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
So that's just the average cost that we have just mentioned. It's like not specifically for the commercial thing. And it all depends, like, as I said, we need to re-access the resources, and also we need to like do the further assessment. We don't know like at this point what it's gonna cost. It's just like the general cost per meter. And with that, I think why drilling cost more is like we have mobilization cost, and we have like cost of transportation and like, you know, transporting equipments from here and there. So that also comes with that.
Sorry, yeah, just to jump on that, the $1,000 a meter, it's a little misleading, I think, how we've added it there. It's that's more for like a mid-depth geothermal project when you're hiring in a massive rig to drill several kilometers into the earth. So yeah, absolutely, for smaller ground source heat pumps, it wouldn't be nearly as expensive.
Yeah, that makes sense. I imagine the technology required to drill that deeply would be very different from just doing it like a normal well drilling company that would use much smaller and maybe less powerful equipment. Have we got any questions from people attending? Yeah. Hi, Nigel.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well.
That was a great presentation. Really enjoyed it, Rupinder. It was really well laid out and it was very easy to understand. I know very little about geothermal. I'd just like to learn a little bit more from the technical side. So you were talking about hydrogeothermal and drawing the water up from underground at a temperature about 60 centigrade. So what happens to that water before it's able to generate electricity? Because I guess you've got to, I don't know, you know, is it go through a turbine? Is it generate steam, or what's the process to generating electricity? I'm just interested to know that.
I think we're not like concerned with the electricity generation. That comes with the enhanced geothermal system. That is the application of that system. But with the mid-depth geothermal potential, we are only like drawing up the water to the surface. It has like certain temperature, and we have like a different piping system from the building that comes down, and it's just like exchange heating energy with that piping system. So we can like draw a heat exchanger there to retrieve the heating energy to use towards heating.
From my understanding, Nigel, with the closed loop system for like a home scale, and I imagine this might be similar. So if you look at the diagram here on the last slide, you can see there's a pipe that's shaped like a U, and going down it's blue and coming back up it's red. And so The closed loop has a liquid inside this pipe that goes down to whatever depth it does. It starts out with water that is cool, just whatever temperature like the solution is, it's cool. As it goes down, the heat conducts then from the water or the rock outside of the pipe into the water, the solution, the liquid that's inside the pipe. Then that warmed water travels up into either the home heating system, the greenhouse heating system, or the aqua, whatever is being heated. And then that same warmth is conducted back out into the cool water. It's like a preheat. So it's not necessarily heating it up to the temperature that you need to create the exact warmth that you need, but it's definitely a preheat situation. And then when the water has traveled through the heating system and heated up whatever needs to be heated up, like the heating system in a home or for a pool or a greenhouse, then that liquid that's in this pipe in the closed loop has cooled down at that point. It travels back down into the earth and reabsorbs heat from its surroundings. And it just keeps traveling around and around as long as the system is in operation.
That's correct.
It's very clever. And from what I understand, the pipes that are used have a very, very long lifespan of up to about 75 years. So it's a very clean system because it's all closed. And so there's very little maintenance that needs to be done on it. And when it's used as a preheat, then whatever additional heating system you have in place, you can add on like an air to water exchange, which does a similar thing, taking warmth from the air and then passing it on to whatever needs to be heated, like hot water in a hot water radiator, for example, or into air for forced air. So it then lowers the energy costs that are required to top up that heat that is required to heat whatever it is that needs to be heated. I hope that sort of explains it a little bit.
Yeah, it does. It does. I'm sort of looking at diagrams online here, and I got into sort of power generation.
Yeah, and Nigel, oh, sorry. Just to your point about electricity generation, it's the concept is kind of as you stated, the idea, whether it's a closed loop or open loop, if you have water that's hot enough and you bring it to the surface to generate steam to spin a turbine, kind of essentially the same as you would with natural gas or coal. Yeah, the concept's the same. We think likely in Nova Scotia, unless you go really, really deep, the geothermal gradient isn't strong enough, but it is still somewhat unknown.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Yeah, it's more, I've got it in my head. It's more, the concept's very much like a heat recovery ventilator, almost, where you bring in air and you exchange it off the air coming out of the building, and then you're doing some heat recovery. So the same type of thing. Yeah. Okay, I got it. So I got another question. So do you have a number of sort of organizations that can make it commercially viable? There are organizations out there that can make it commercially viable. I've not come across any, I've heard that geothermal in Atlantic Canada is an area that we don't focus heavily on, and it's sometimes misunderstood. And I was wondering whether, to be successful at a project at this sort of level, you've got to be able to have the engineering expertise and somebody that can commercialize it and get the costs down. Is there those organizations out there, and where, in North America would they be coming from?
That's a good question. And your assessment is pretty accurate. As far as Atlantic Canada goes, geothermal is still like a real niche thing, which is partly why we're doing the work that we're doing. It's a different story in Western Canada, particularly in Alberta, where there's a lot of overlap between some of the oil and gas expertise and drilling, really, and geothermal, and also the geological knowledge of the province. So in Alberta, where there's a really good understanding of what goes on below the surface, it's accelerated geothermal projects here. That's not to say we can't have it here, but we're still developing some of the geological knowledge. Absolutely, there's other groups in Canada. I mean, Alberta for sure. There are geothermal companies there that would be interested in working here. The big challenge with geothermal is there are some unknowns at the start of a project with drilling into a reservoir, and is the water going to be warm enough? And two, is it going to be the kind of reservoir that you want, where it will recharge enough? And you can do a lot of geophysical modeling on the surface to try and figure that out, but it's still a risk until you drill down. So in order to make that commercially viable, really the next steps are, I think I'm correct in saying, I'm not putting anyone on the spot here, that the government will need to take some action to sort of conduct a geothermal de-risking program that includes some test wells in some areas, whether it's Cumberland County and around Spring Hill, where we have some of the highest potential, or somewhere in Cape Breton, where there are some customers who would be well suited for it. So yeah, that's kind of the first step, is reducing the risk by drilling some test wells, and yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's going to be a challenge, because at the moment I know Nova Scotia is really looking at decarbonising, and they're trying to split on the renewables, and especially wind power, and we've got a goal to get to 80% source of renewables by 2030. So geothermal, in the way I got it from your presentation, is really just a small part of that equation in terms of having one-offs in sort of geographic locations that are permissible, and would meet the criteria. That's correct?
Yeah, it's certainly, not going to have, it's not going to be massively deployed, like, say, all of the talk about offshore wind turbines or something like that, but it could still play a really important role, particularly depending on the project, for heating as well, because that's such a massive challenge for electrification right now.
I have another question. I was really thinking about, and this follows up nicely with what we were just talking about. Rupinder, you were talking about the heat that can be provided from drilling to different depths. And Joe, you were saying that, it's kind of a question mark until you actually get down there to see what the temperature will be. And as you said, is it a reservoir that will keep replenishing its maintaining its temperature as we put cold back down into it to be reheated? So do you think there's a model where testing can be done and surveying can be done that would then provide kind of a connection between, hey, if you have this industry, if you have this kind of building, if you have this business, this location in Cape Breton or elsewhere in Nova Scotia is exactly the right fit for you. Would there be that kind of thing coming out of it, where you can really pair up the location to the needs of a business that would be best suited for what's available there?
Do you want to answer that, Rupinder, or?
You can answer that.
Okay. Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's part of the objectives of this program, in a sense. There's kind of two objectives. The first is what Rupinder's did an excellent job of this evening, which is basically just talking about Nova Scotia's geothermal resources, how geothermal technology can be deployed, some of the next steps to the public in general. But another thing that we're doing is, reaching out to groups where we think there could be some kind of fit, like their demand for heat matches up nicely with geothermal heat, and talking with those groups and seeing if there's interest in moving forward. We're kind of getting into that second phase of the project in a little bit more depth now, but it's exciting for sure. It certainly still requires we actually released a report. It's not put out to the public yet, but on geothermal engagement in Hants County, and it's called "If You Build It and Pay for It, Then They Will Come." And I think that's a fair sort of assessment. There's so much risk and it's so expensive, but if we can get some of those pilot projects and have the government sort of front the cost for the initial de-risking with some of the drilling, then it could absolutely lead to other projects.
I have one more question, which will probably just round us out. Is I've seen in Scandinavian countries and other places where there's a new community being built or an area that hasn't, that either needs completely revamping in terms of utilities and heating in particular, or a new building being put in, or a series of buildings in a particular area, whether it's in a downtown or in a rural area, that they're using communal geothermal systems. And I'm wondering if there's an application for that situation with the research that you're doing and how that could positively impact neighborhoods that either exist that have, let's say, a shared laneway or a shared road, or new developments that are happening, whether they're business or other.
Yeah, I can take it first, and then Rupinder, if you have anything you want to add as well. Personally, I feel like there's a lot of promise there for Nova Scotia, and yeah, Scandinavia is doing it, and also the United States is as well. There's some cool synergies with. I was at a conference in Minnesota, and there were some people there from like the Natural Gas Pipe Fitters Union, talking about switching their workforce over to working on these geothermal thermal energy networks, because there are so many sort of transferable skills there, and yeah, it's an excellent way of sort of sharing the load between community and really a smart way of using water without too much cost or energy, especially for new developments. So that's something that, yeah, I'd really like to delve into and learn a little bit more about, and how maybe we can have some conversations with some of new housing developments that are going up everywhere in Nova Scotia. But I think particularly around Sydney and Membertou, for instance, and a lot of these developments have aspirations of having less of a carbon footprint, and this seems like a really good way of doing it. So yeah, not sure if that answered the question, but yeah, I agree. I think that idea of the thermal energy network is fantastic and has a lot of promise here.
Yeah, that absolutely answered my question. Thank you. And I'm glad that's on the radar and of interest. I also had heard about the interesting work in the US where, because they're banning new fossil fuel coming into communities, that natural gas company, like installation companies, are transitioning to geothermal. I think there was an article on CBC about, I think it was in Massachusetts. There was
yeah,
that had done some really interesting work. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll add to the first question that you asked about, like, do we have existing resources to access, like, refer to the buildings and businesses around. I was reading this new Victoria water treatment plant in Sydney, and I think so they have like drilled down 700 feet long, and then maybe they have like sort of temperature readings and thermal properties, and that we could make use of towards assessing geothermal in that area. And then we also have like feasibility studies on New Waterford and distributed energy network near Sydport and the Sydney Harbour. So I think so these kind of resources could be helpful if we do further assessment at the provincial level. This could be helpful.
Yeah, just a comment. I'm a big fan of geothermal because like you said, the coefficient of performance is the same throughout the year. You know, most people think of, you know, heat pumps and so forth and associate geothermal with heat pumps, and heat pumps coefficient of performance will change depending on the season you're in. And it really does lend itself to where you've got fairly large communities where you can do almost a central heating system. One area that, and again, this is just my opinion, is, you know, we're talking a lot about the housing crisis and having to build affordable homes. And there's a big push in making sort of affordable homes a lot more energy efficient and adopting sort of passive house standards. And there's a lot of communities, well, I say a lot of communities, but there are talk about bringing up communities with social and affordable housing. This would be a good discussion point with that sort of cohort, is to look at that, and especially in where greenfield sites. There was that recent community that was done. Is it Adsum? Do you know what I'm on about, Hannah?
Yes,
Just outside
absolutely.
Halifax.
Yeah.
You know, that would be a sort. Now they ended up putting heat pumps individually onto all the buildings, but then you've got an opportunity to really look at having a geothermal application for those type of communities, and you know, any co-housing sort of initiatives as well. We've got a co-housing initiative in Bridgewater. I don't know whether those are on your radar in terms of your engagement, but it may be worth talking to that side of it and seeing whether there's any sort of synergies that can be married up there to make the case. Just my comments.
That's a great comment, and yeah, we've thought a little bit about that, but you're absolutely right. Like co-housing, that's not something we've really looked at as much, and fits the bill perfectly. So thanks for that. Yeah.
I put the link
Welcome.
to Add Some House project in the chat. And the passive house architect company, I guess, like that supported that, will be giving a talk later this year, either in August or September, specifically about that project. So I'm really excited to
yeah, passive design solutions there, and the CEO is Natalie Leonard. Yeah, it might be worth trying to have a discussion with her, because she's really pushing the ball out in terms of adoption of passive house for affordable homes.
I will write that down right now. Thank you.
Thanks for making that connection, Nigel. One of the other projects that I'm working on is that I've brought together a group of people and organizations to talk about affordable multifamily housing and energy efficiency work, and supporting Efficiency Nova Scotia's rebate program in that area. And the uptake is really good, as you can imagine, in the nonprofit sector, because every penny they save can go straight back into their programming. But in the landlord building owner sector, it's much more difficult, because if a landlord is not paying utilities, then there's less motivation to do this work, unless they're really they have a mandate from a board, or just from their personal mandate to be more climate conscious and reducing their footprint. So we're speaking again on June 20th about that topic. So Nigel, if you're interested, or Joe and Rupinder, be happy to loop you in on that conversation as well.
That would be
Yeah.
fantastic. Thanks.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, I will.
Thanks.
And as we wrap up tonight, I just want to thank you both, Rupinder and Joe, so much for being here with us tonight. And thank you, Nigel, and to our other person who is online. They said it was a really, really great presentation, and they were sorry they had to jump to another meeting before the questions were over. And I'd like to give you a little heads up about our next presentation. These Better Building Speaker presentations happen every last Wednesday of the month. So the next one is on June 26th. And Jessica McElroy, who's a manager of buildings at Pembina Institute in BC, will talk about Pembina's recent report, Better Buildings for All, Relieving Energy Poverty Through Deep Retrofits, which is
Nice.
a really nice follow-up to what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
So I send out a link with every Culture of Efficiency newsletter. And so if you don't subscribe to that, please do. That's through the Ecology Action Center website. And if you do, then you'll be getting a next link in the second week of June to join that meeting at the end of June. So thanks again, and I really appreciate you being here with us tonight and taking time out of this gorgeous sunny day to share this really important information.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Joe and Rupinder. Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, it was really informative. Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks for the suggestions.
Thanks very much. Yeah, great talking with you,
Yeah.
Nigel and Hannah.